You saw the thumbnail. You read the title of this video. I've only been teasing it for weeks. I think everyone knows what's going on here. It's finally time to do the video that nobody asked for and everybody secretly needed. The comparison of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Doctor Who. Welcome to the All Trades Jack channel. I am the titular Titillating Jack, and I'm back with another USA from the USA. In this series, I, a big-headed and uninformed American, speak ad nauseum about the British cultural institution that is Doctor Who, all while trying not to become an enemy of the crown. Today's USA, how Doctor Who taught me to stop worrying and love JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Or how JoJo's Bizarre Adventure taught me to stop worrying and love anime. As strange as it is for me to admit this now, there was a point in my life, really most of my life, where I didn't watch anime. I could never get past the immature humor, the campy dialogue, the hyper-stylized character designs, or the convoluted plots. It would bother me when power scaling didn't add up, or when long-established parts of the lore would be ignored in favor of short-term storytelling conveniences. There was also a persistent aura of main character energy, which weakened the stakes of the story and made the violence feel muted, serving only as eye candy. Then, of course, there was always the feeling that it simply wasn't made for me. These shows were made for another country with a very different culture, and many of these programs had a younger audience in mind as well, one much younger than me. With all that said, you may be thinking that it sounds like I still don't like anime, but that's not the case at all. In fact, I've always liked anime on some level. There have always been a couple of animes in rotation at any given point in my life. Shows like Samurai Champloo, Cowboy Bebop, Fooly Cooly, those got a pass for not having so many of the tropes that I disliked. And so did films like Akira and the works of Hayao Miyazaki. Even some shows which did fall victim to these tropes got a pass, such as Yu Yu Hakusho, Claymore, or Trigun. But my love for these shows was never strong enough to get me over the tropes themselves and encourage me to explore more of what anime had to offer. These days, I can embrace these once impenetrable elements and accept them as being features and not bugs, so I can meet an anime where it's at. What I find really interesting is how and why my perspective finally changed. I was in my late 20s, and a coworker of mine who was aware of my hangups related to anime decided it was going to be his goal to get me to watch anime. He recommended a bunch of stuff. Most of it I didn't bite, but he was persistent. So eventually, he talked me into watching something. He sold me on a pitch. He said, I got this show, watch the first season, and if you get to the first season, you'll be hooked. And I said, that's a lot to ask. I mean, a pilot's one thing, couple episodes, sure, but you want me to watch this whole season on your word? And he's like, trust me, you're going to love it. It's going to be your favorite anime. Not even just that you'd like it. He said it's going to be your favorite anime. So for the next 5 days, I binged this season, and I was treated to every single trope, every storytelling device and design aesthetic that I hated most in anime. And they were all turned up to 11. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, not watching the show, but to return to work the next week, because I had to face my coworker and tell him that I had somehow inexplicably, absolutely inconceivably fallen head over heels in love with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I'd watched the season, parts 1 and 2 that he told me to watch, and I'd watched much of part 3 as well. I was very much invested, and and he wasn't surprised. But that's because he knew 2 facts. The first fact was that I was, as I am now, a Doctor Who fan. I loved the show. Even back then, I was obsessed with it and not exactly hiding it. People knew that I was into Doctor Who. And the other thing he knew was that Doctor Who and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure are the same show. I think if you were very familiar with both of these shows, you'll know exactly what I mean. But I'm also aware of how unhinged it would sound to the average person, or even someone who's familiar with one of these properties, or both of them loosely. But to my old coworker, this made perfect sense. Knowing I was a fan of Doctor Who, he didn't accept me saying that I didn't like anime on the basis of it having immature humor.
shaking my booty.
Or campy dialogue.
We have an intruder!
How did he get in? Intruder window?
Or hyper-stylized character designs.
That's what you're going with. Yep.
Or convoluted plots.
Oh, no, but that's not possible. She was sealed into the seventh obelisk. I was at the prayer meeting. Well, no, I get that it's important. An Egyptian goddess loose on the Orient Express. In space.
Plot armor certainly wasn't the deal breaker I had made it out to be, seeing as my favorite TV protagonist was virtually death-proof, even when the story was taking its internal stakes seriously. And he knew that. He also knew that I was perfectly capable of getting past it when power scaling didn't add up, or when long-established parts of the lore would be ignored in favor of short-term storytelling conveniences, because I'd learned to see past all of these tropes in Doctor Who. But that coworker of mine was never as big of a fan of Doctor Who as I was. And, my love for JoJo's has grown vastly in the years since. So I've seen deeper into the connections between these shows than even he was aware when he recommended the show to me on the basis that they were basically the same show. I want to really get deep into this. So without further ado, here is the comparison absolutely nobody was asking for. The clearest commonality between these two shows are the recurring storylines told across generations, which all center around a single hero's many incarnations. Each incarnation has their own style, their own personality, and their own quirks. Yet each of them also possesses an intrinsic quality that binds them to the original hero. The protagonist of each JoJo's Bizarre Adventure part is a brand new character, with a new backstory, new abilities, and a cadre of both allies and enemies, or Joe Bros and Joe Foes. But all of them are tied into the fate of the Joestar family, and they bear that same star birthmark, and they're all called JoJo, or otherwise have JoJo in their name. Despite being different people, they are all the same general character from a storytelling perspective, with the same core values, not unlike how the Doctor regenerates into a new person each time they die and come back with both an alter ego, which is distinct from the one that came before, but also an unshakable sense of continuity. No two Doctors are alike, yet they are all inarguably the same character from one incarnation to the next. This paradigm of regeneration and continuity gives these kinds of shows longevity and the ability to explore all kinds of stories in different genres. However, it does this at the expense of the main character's development. They are often given the least interesting character arcs in their own stories because their values must be the bedrock upon which the story is constructed. Between arcs or parts, we as the audience get to enjoy a little taste of character development here and there, which comes in the form of regeneration or reincarnation or the new incarnation, however you want to look at it with the JoJo's, where we get to explore what makes this new version similar to and different from their predecessors. But within the story and across its narrative, throughout a single part of JoJo's or a season or series of Doctor Who, the main character's development is limited, which is why both the Doctor and JoJo never adventure alone. While the protagonist serves as the thematic core of the story, their friends and allies take on a more human role, which we can relate to. They are flawed characters who go through change across their series, across their part in JoJo, or across the seasons of Doctor Who. The JoBros and companions are fan favorite characters and are often the most interesting, most compelling parts of their stories. They play many roles both in the narrative and as storytelling devices.
What do you think is the role of the companion?
Well, apart from being lovely to look at, you mean? You've always known the answer to that. You tell me. Go on.
Well, to ask a lot of questions.
Yes, true. What else?
To make the Doctor look very clever.
Of course. What else?
To let the audience know what's going on.
You're getting there. What else?
To reaffirm the patently obvious.
This description works well to describe the role of the JoBro, just as much as it does to describe a TARDIS companion. Especially that part about being lovely to look at. I mean, look at these boys. Just look at Jotaro. He is a stoic with a streak of righteous violence, and that is true throughout Stardust Crusaders. Similarly, the 10th Doctor is a lonely god with a streak of righteous violence throughout his Series 3 run. Neither makes great changes across a single season of television, other than becoming more powerful in order to beat their prospective baddie. However, characters such as Polnareff and Martha Jones go on very intense character arcs in that same short period. Polnareff becomes a loyal, dedicated, and self-sacrificing friend with a purpose beyond revenge, and Martha becomes a hardened, self-reliant operator capable of conducting solo missions on a global scale. Polnareff learns the importance of trusting others and working as part of a team. Martha learns the importance of family and self-respect. I feel like I could make a whole video just comparing how similar the Jopanions are to the Jopanions. Obviously, I meant to say Joe Bros and Companions, but now Jopanions is a thing, so we're going to keep rolling with that. But I feel like I could make a whole video just about the ways in which the Companions and the Joe Bros are alike. Right down to making a one-to-one comparison for one companion to one Joe Bro. For instance, that video might explain how Foo Fighters is kind of the same as Chameleon, since they're non-human companions who can look like other things, or how Iggy is more like Mickey than K9. But no one would want to watch that video. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know. I might come back and write that one at a later date, or record that one at a later date in case I've already started writing it. But, just let me know if that is something you'd want to see. For now, we have other similarities to outline, like the divisions within each of these shows. Both JoJo's and Doctor Who have distinct eras to them. Doctor Who had its classic era, which is narratively followed by the Time War, which results in the Revival series, a very different show from its predecessor. Recently, through plot contrivances involving a line of salt at the edge of the universe, we've entered a new age for the hero and the show. Likewise, JoJo's has the early Hamon era, which is narratively followed by the coming of the Stands, which results in the structural change which makes up for a very different kind of show in the preceding seasons. Recently, through a plot contrivance involving the existence of multiple universes, we've entered a new age for the hero. Both the Revival era of Doctor Who and the Stand era of JoJo's are the most recognizable version of their respective shows, and follow the same format. A Monster of the Week style episodic with a series arc that unfolds slowly over each season, typically leading to a big bad or the resolution of a series-long conflict. Most of the episodes are concerned with dealing with the monster / alien / stand / alien of the week and involve the Jopanions asking a lot of questions while the hero pulls out one inexplicable win after the other, only to explain it in excruciating and sometimes unintelligible detail as it's all being wrapped up in the end. Figuring out the abilities and the weaknesses of the unknown enemy of the week makes up a lot of the narrative tension, and the Jopanions have the opportunity to make a name for themselves by being the one to figure it out when the Doctor or JoJo is otherwise indisposed. The baddies of both shows are best known for their otherworldly powers, their unique designs, and their love for repeating themselves. Though each of these shows has a deep bench of villains and a few standout season arc bad guys, each of them also has one who stands out above the rest, an iconic baddie whose influence is felt throughout the series as a whole, and who always steals the show when they're on screen. Of course, that would be the Master in Doctor Who and Dio in JoJo's. These are larger-than-life personalities with a wicked sense of style that complements and contrasts with the hero. Their powers are comparable to the hero's, but their cunning and maniacal scheming often gives them the upper hand. They are obsessed with immortality and see themselves as an ultimate life form, a superior to all inferior beings of the cosmos. In this video, I tease the idea of doing the one-to-one comparison of Joe Bros and Companions to do a Jopanions video, and I kind of have further teasing this out by comparing the Master to Dio, because obviously we could do a whole video about that too, comparing Doctor Who aliens and bad guys to the Jofos. But I really, I'm not ready to go hard on making that video right now, because I don't know that anyone would want to watch that. That's a little even more niche than this video already is. So I think it only makes sense to give you what you wanted when you saw the thumbnail, when you read the title. And then maybe if you're vibing with this and you guys sound off in the comments and give the video some likes, maybe I'll do that Jopanions video, the Jofos video, and we can do a little bit more one-to-one comparisons. But without further ado, I think it's time to ask the ultimate question: which doctor would each JoJo be? And I'm doing it that way because there are more doctors than JoJos, and I don't want to have to do a bunch of repeats. Like, even if we just did modern doctors to JoJo's, there's 7 modern doctors and only 6 anime JoJo's. And I am doing animes because, I don't do Doctor Who the courtesy of including the books in my comparison stuff. So how am I going to include the manga? That just wouldn't be American of me. So I'm gonna apply my rules strictly across the board, and we're going to just stick to the anime and the show. So we're going to do who is each JoJo if they were a doctor. And if you don't agree with any of my picks, obviously, let me have it. Tell me if my picks are bad, and give me yours. I'm honestly interested in hearing them. But let's get started. The original JoJo is a Victorian gentleman and a noble warrior. He is intelligent and educated and chivalric. Despite this, he has an edge to him, a rage which boils just beneath the surface. He doesn't have a deep bench of Joe Bros, but his friends are very significant, especially Robert E.O. Speedwagon, who would go on to serve future JoJos with the Speedwagon Foundation. Johnathan lacks many of the things future JoJos will be known for, but it is his moral code which is grafted onto every one of his successors. You're probably expecting that I'm going to say that the first Doctor would be the match for Johnathan, and that makes a lot of sense. They are both the first, and Hartnell's look, his costume, blended Victorian and Edwardian sensibilities, evoking the same kind of aristocratic vibe as Johnathan. Also, the first Doctor can be very grumpy, so he's got that boiling rage thing going on. But most doctors do, so I think that's not really a point in his favor, because I think that even with all those things in his favor, there is still one that's a better pick than the first Doctor. Someone who has a lot of similarities, and that would be the second Doctor. Troughton is more Edwardian than Victorian, and he's kind of got a down on his luck tramp vibe going on. But despite how different he looks, he has some key similarities to Johnathan. Let's start with a hot take. Troughton is the real first Doctor. No hate, I swear, no hate against Hartnell, but he was a prototype. He's Steamboat Willie. Everything that we think of as the Doctor begins with Troughton. He is the one who was born from regeneration. He was the one who is called a Time Lord. He has a sonic device. He's Mickey Mouse. He, like Johnathan, doesn't have a very deep bench of companions, but he also made a few very important friends who went on to be quite important. Most especially the Brigadier, who would go on to serve many future Doctors with UNIT. True, he doesn't have all the things that a modern Doctor would have, such as 2 hearts, but it's his moral code more so than Hartnell's, which becomes the base model for the Doctor. Hartnell's Doctor is more of a begrudging hero and a grumpy old man. He's a curmudgeon, and he only likes adventure because he's slightly impish. Whereas Troughton's doctor he's more curious, sure, but he's more of a traditional hero. He's more of a willing hero, and he takes on his heroic role with a little bit more vim and vigor than the first Doctor ever did. Troughton and Johnathan both set the standard for their successors, while establishing many of the core themes of their respective shows. They introduced key returning characters and organizations, as well as lore concepts, which would morph with the effect of long-term power scaling. Anyone who watched my last Who essay from the USA can probably already guess who I'm going to pick for Joseph's Doctor. After all, Joseph is the American JoJo. Who else could it be but the American Doctor Who, Paul McGann himself? I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not Paul McGann's Doctor is American in this video. I just did a video on it. If you take issue with that, go watch that video and say something in the comments there. I will gladly argue the point to you as long as you want to argue about it. Until either I've changed your mind or you've changed mine. But this place, we're going to take it as a foregone conclusion. Paul McGann is the American Doctor. But don't even sweat it, because that's not the only reason I'm saying that he would be Joseph's Doctor. They have much deeper connections than all of that. Joseph serves as a bridge point from the Hamon era to the Stans era, just as McGann occupies this place between the classic and revival eras of Doctor Who. Joseph diverges from his predecessor, and to some extent his successors as well, by being hypersexual, flirting openly with multiple women, peeking through keyholes, and later cheating on Susie Q. Much how McGann's romance with Grace diverged from the no hanky-panky rule of the classic era of Doctor Who. And his fling even comes off as cold when compared to the Doctor's future romantic entanglements of the revival era. Both had a limited run, since Joseph's Part 2 shares half of its episode count with Jonathan's Part 1, and McGann only gets a TV movie and some audio dramas, but none of this is why I think the two characters are a perfect match. There's an even deeper connection. This is all just extra. You see, they operate in the exact same way when it comes to how they solve their problems. They have two skills which are their main toolkit. That is divination and legerdemain. Joseph is known for his uncanny ability to predict the next thing you're going to say. He showcases this ability throughout battle tendencies. Later in life, he develops a stand which allows him to take spirit photos, a kind of prognostication in the form of pictures and videos. McGann's version of the Doctor can actively see into a person's past and future, knowing what they've experienced and what will happen to them without the need to travel in time. Joseph also uses sleight of hand and trickery to get one over on his enemies. And the Eighth Doctor similarly uses the art of legerdemain to hide stolen tech or to steal police firearms. Both of these American rad lads are masters of trickery and divination, and they're both insatiable love magnets. They act as the middle ground between what came before and what was to come, and they made lasting impacts despite having truncated stories. Jotaro is the JoJo most people think of if you mention the show to them. To noobs and normies, he is JoJo. In the dub, he is voiced by a beloved actor, one worshipped by nerds. His is the most recognizable era of the show, with the most recognizable and beloved JoBros. The sexy, confident, fair-haired one, the no-nonsense, take-charge, dark-haired one, and the loyal, self-sacrificing, red-headed one. The era revived old villains, introduced new concepts and abilities, and brought the show to a whole new audience and a new generation. Throughout the seasons which followed his, Jotaro would come back many times to help future JoJos. Anyone who knows Doctor Who should be able to hear those words and know exactly who Jotaro's counterpart is. The 10th Doctor is the Doctor most people think of if you mention the show. To noobs and normies, he is the Doctor. He is portrayed by David Tennant, a beloved actor worshipped by nerds. His is the most recognizable era of the show in the modern day, with the most recognizable and beloved companions. The sexy, confident, fair-haired one, the no-nonsense, take-charge, dark-haired one, and the loyal, self-sacrificing redhead. This era revived old villains, introduced new concepts and abilities, and brought the show to a whole new audience and a new generation. In the years since, Tennant has returned many times to help other doctors. This one is almost too easy, but I will admit most of this would also apply to the fourth Doctor. He, too, is played by a beloved actor who is worshipped by the nerd culture. For decades, he was the Doctor in the eyes of the casuals and many of the fans. His era also reintroduced bad guys while making them fresh and adding to their lore and abilities, helping to bring the show into a new age. He also had a deep bench of lovable companions, and though he didn't have any redheads in his TARDIS team, he does hang out with a dog, just like Jotaro, so, I mean, he's got that going over Tennant. Ultimately, though, we have to choose one, and the winner today for Jotaro is the 10th Doctor. If you disagree, let me know why. That said, both Jotaro and Tennant defined their show for a new generation, and broke into the cultural zeitgeist in a big way. Their version of the show broke the mold, diverging from the seasons which preceded it, but also became the mold for every season to follow. Their era was defined by a Monster of the Week format, which was punctuated by the return of the protagonist's greatest enemies. Both would return to the show many times, and neither has ceased to be relevant to the fanbase or to the story.
Let's rock out!
Compared to the JoJos, Josuke is low-key. He keeps it street level, not straying far from his hometown of Morio. He's a little bit fabulous, but don't let that fool you. If you cross him, he has moves. Though his innate nature is as a healer, not a fighter. As for his JoBros, they are grounded in his community, though he expands his party to include outsiders and even an alien. One of his closest JoBros continues into the next part with the next JoJo, and he is the first JoJo to team up with two of his predecessors in a single episode, even if one of them was a very old man who could hardly contribute. His villain isn't a world ender. They're a local threat, but they're one which poses a danger to the people of Morio and extends into existential terror beyond death. Now, I know earlier I compared the Hamon era to the classic era, and the Stand era to the Revival era. So it would stand to reason that I would find a modern era Doctor to match with Josuke. But I've been racking my brain to find a modern equivalent to Josuke, and there's not one. At first I was thinking of Shooty because they are both just like a little bit fabulous and have like a healing-centric approach to conflict resolution. But 15's bad guys are literal gods, and his companions are all mysterious and enigmatic, and it doesn't vibe with Josuke's street level friendly neighborhood approach to the story. It's just not a good fit, and the real trouble is all of the Doctors are just a bit too traveled. They get around the galaxy a little bit too much to be anything like Josuke. That is, except for one Doctor of the classic era. So even though he's, we're going to cross that line a little bit, I really think that the third Doctor is the most like Josuke. Compared to the other Doctors, Jon Pertwee kept it low-key. He stayed earthbound, street level, not straying far from Unit HQ. He's a little bit fabulous, but don't let that fool you. If you cross him, he has moves. Though his innate nature is as a Doctor, not a fighter. As for his companions, they are grounded in his work with Unit, though he extends his friendship to include outsiders and even tries to make peace with Silurians. One of his closest companions continues into the next era, and he is the first Doctor to team up with two of his predecessors in a single episode, even if one of them was a really old man who could hardly contribute. His villains aren't all a bunch of world enders. They're local threats. The Base Under Siege episode format became popular in this era, and most of the alien attacks are on specific buildings or small towns or deserted sections of cities. This era didn't take existential dread to mean the end of existence, but instead focused on personal experiences of existential horror. These two local lads with drip to spare and fabulous hair will set your broken bones for you as they are breaking them. That's just the kind of guys they are. Their adventures keep things relatively close to home, and the stakes are always personal. They cultivate close friendships with budding heroes, and celebrate the long traditions of their shows, and the heroes who came before them. Giorno might be the hardest one to place because he is the least like the other JoJos. Giorno was born of the flesh of a Joestar, but under the influence of Dio's evil. So while he has the golden heart of a Joestar, he does things others wouldn't dirty their hands with. In order to end gang warfare and drugs on the street which threaten the soul and safety of his community, he takes on a dark mission which leads him to become a mafioso who takes life without a second thought. He embraces gang culture so that he can undermine it. All this makes him kind of hard to place, and his abilities also put him outside the range of other JoJos. Golden Experience isn't insanely powerful compared to the others, but by the end of the part, it evolves into Golden Experience Requiem, a stand beyond time and space, a move which can't be countered or defended against. Its signature ability is Return to Zero, an absolute reset of an enemy, removing their actions from time and causing them to experience a death loop, caught in a pocket of no time where they exist only to be unmade over and over forever. I deliberated on this one for a really long time, and I could only think of one doctor who gets close to Giorno's character. And I mean, there was some that came close to this character, but when you think about everything, not just his character, but his abilities and his mission, all of it together, the full package, the only one who meets the full criteria is the War Doctor. He too is unlike his fellow doctors. In fact, the other doctors don't like him and pretend he's not one of them. He regenerated from the Doctor, but under the influence of the Sisterhood of Karn, who made him more warlike. So while he has the Doctor's values, he doesn't have their restraint. In order to end the Time War which threatens the soul and safety of his people, he becomes a Gallifreyan soldier who takes life without a second thought. He embraces the war to bring it to an end. At the end of his story, he obtains a new power, much like Giorno and Requiem. The War Doctor obtains the Moment, a living superweapon which can't be blocked or countered, one which would end Daleks and Time Lords alike, quantum locking them and the whole Time War in a pocket of no time space, where they will simultaneously exist and not exist for all of time. Giorno and the War Doctor are outsiders to their respective families and do the kinds of things which would make their counterparts squeamish. Their abilities put them at near god levels, with techniques that transcend all defenses and even time itself. They are both only foot soldiers in a larger organization, and yet both of them get the final shot of their respective wars and end them definitively. They aren't the hero we deserve, but they are the heroes we needed. They were Dr. JoJo on the day it was impossible to be Dr. JoJo. I guess I lied earlier when I said that Joseph was the American JoJo. I did say he was the first, but there are technically two, because Jolyne is also an American JoJo. And I know what you're expecting now is for me to say that she's Jodie, because they're the female doctor and the female JoJo, and they should be the same. But really think about it, and you'll see that they are nothing alike. Jolyne Cujoh is the victim of a corrupt system and a conspiracy to undermine her father, which catches her in the middle. She is sent to prison and is locked up, has her freedoms stripped away. She doesn't get to go on adventures. She doesn't get to defend her home. She doesn't even get to choose her Joe Bros. She simply has to find some way to escape the corrupt system which has unjustly captured her. Compare that to Jodie, a free-loving spirit who is all about empowerment and expressiveness, whose companions she not only chose, but chose as her surrogate family. She is not bound whatsoever. She does have a single episode arc where she goes to prison and is immediately broken out. So I guess you could say that there's loosely the prison connection there, but these two could not be more different. However, you wouldn't be totally wrong if you said that I was going to just go with the female doctor to compare to the female JoJo, because I kind of am. There's one doctor who really is a lot more like Jolyne, and that is the fugitive doctor. The fugitive doctor is also a victim of a corrupt system, the Time Lords, and specifically division. Though they aren't wanted for their parentage like Jolyne and Jotaro, they are wanted because of their genetic heritage, the fact that they are the timeless child. They aren't kept in a prison, but they are held against their will as a part of division, working missions that they would not otherwise choose to do. Their companions are just other squad mates, people probably chosen for them. This is a doctor who doesn't get to see the universe, who doesn't get to be a part of the larger adventure. And that comes to another connection that these two share, which is that both of them ultimately have lore that is meaningless. And I say that with a broken heart. I have no joy in telling you this, because in Jolyne's case, the end of Stone Ocean, I won't go into depth with it, but the end of Stone Ocean has an event which triggers a new status quo. But the series which follows after it doesn't use that new status quo. It starts somewhere else. So Jolyne basically is the end of a story that doesn't end but starts again, and it doesn't start where she brought us back to. So she's a dead end. The resolution of her story doesn't matter, or at least it doesn't matter yet. Maybe one day Araki will remember, and then we'll get to resolve what happened with that universe. But for the time being, those memories are just kind of gone in limbo. The same way that the fugitive doctor's memories are kind of gone in limbo in that watch that Jodie dropped into the TARDIS, one that contains all her memories. We still don't get to know where she fits into the timeline, and that story is largely going to go unanswered for a while. Truth be told, when I started working on this video, when I started working on the script, it was before the fugitive doctor showed back up in the most recent as of recording episode. But honestly, that was such a confusing do-nothing cameo that I don't think it really changes anything I said here. That said, Jolyne and the fugitive doctor are two individuals trapped under a corrupt system trying to fight their way out. Both are targeted for the powers associated with their genetic heritage, and both find companionship with the people that they are forced to be in close proximity with. Both of their stories end tragically, and unfortunately, both of their stories still exist in a state of limbo where their resolutions don't really have any meaning. Well, I did it. Every one of the 6 JoJos, and I've given them all a doctor. But you may be thinking that I've cheated you. And maybe I did, because in that thumbnail I put all those modern doctors, and you didn't get to see most of them. You didn't get to see most of your favorites. Most of you are probably modern Doctor Who fans and are not happy with the fact that I chose the War Doctor or the made for TV movie Doctor or the Fugitive Doctor. So I'm going to go ahead and, just for you all who stayed to this point in the video, if you didn't lose interest already, or if you didn't rage click out of here and you stuck around to this point, surprise, surprise, I'm going to do a bonus round at the end where I'm going to speed through all the modern doctors and give them a JoJo. I know I said I wasn't going to, but we're going to do a speed round. We're not going to go as in-depth with these ones. So for Christopher Eccleston, I'm going to give him Jotaro. And I know we already assigned Jotaro, but actually I'm going to give him a different Jotaro. I'm going to give him the Jotaro of the OVA. If you haven't seen the OVA, it's much darker. The comedy is much more pared down, and it's also a shorter run. And that's part of the reason I'm also picking it, because he only had one season. So the idea of picking the OVA, which is a much more truncated version of the story, I kind of think that's appropriate. But yeah, he's darker. He's more brooding. He's got that really stark black jacket. I don't know. I like the vibes. It's mostly a vibes pick. All right, for David Tennant, I'm going to switch him as well. I'm not going to give him Jotaro again because I think we can find a better one. I'm going to give David Tennant Johnathan, just because even though he's a bit of a romantic, he's a bit of a Casanova. Yeah, I know. But I think that the way his relationships play out is very similar to the way Johnathan and Irina act. You know, it's less like Yowza Matt Smith romance, and it's more like, oh, I'm terribly befuddled about the fact that I have feelings and I can't possibly tell you what those feelings are. Like, you know, they're very similar in the way that they're reserved about that. They're also both very studious, you know, like they both went through their professor arc. So I'm gonna match these two up together. I think that's a fun one. Moving on, let's do Matt Smith. Matt Smith is going to be who do we think Matt Smith? I think Matt Smith is gonna be Joseph, because like we were saying, Matt Smith is the real he's the Yowza lover boy. You know, he's the one like grabbing Jenny and kissing Jenny when she's all doing her leather karate routine, and he's the one who's like always slobbering all over River Song, and like, I don't know, he's the one who did that monologue about a skirt that's too tight. I don't know, he's a horny boy, so I'm gonna give him Joseph, peeping through the keyhole at his mom looking ass. And that's another thing. They both have an oops, I accidentally had a maternal sexy thought, because Joseph peeks through a keyhole at his mom, and Matt Smith, his doctor makes out with Amy, who's his mother-in-law mom. So that's fun, you know. We're just keeping it fun for this one. So they're gonna get paired up together. Let's see who's next. As Peter Capaldi. Peter Capaldi, I'm going to give him Jotaro, actually. I think I'm going to give him late-stage Jotaro. I'm going to give him, like, Professor Jotaro, because, like, him in the Bill Potts era, and he's, like, a professor taking on students. The way he took on Josuke, the way he took on Koichi. I almost forgot his name there for a second. But the way he took on Koichi. You know, he takes different heroes under his wing and coaches them up, and I think that's very similar to the way that Peter Capaldi in his late stage, he, you know, has Nardole, and who used to be like a black market dealer, and he's like trying to rehab him. And he's got Bill, who's like a down on their luck lunch lady, who he's like trying to like get to go to school. And he's got the master, who he's trying to like unmasterify. So like, yeah, I like that for him. The idea of they're both like professors who take prospective heroes under their wings and tries to like push them in the right direction towards doing good deeds and heroic stuff. I really like them as a pair together, specifically that era for both of them. Early Capaldi, like right after his regeneration. I don't know where that Capaldi would land. He's a bit all over the place, but I'm just going with where he gelled out by the end of his tenure. So 13, I'm not going to do the whole thing with Jolyne. Yeah, we've already talked about it. I'm not doing Jolyne for 13. I think 13 is probably most like Giorno. Why? Because they're blonde. No, because Giorno sets out with a mission. Like we were saying earlier, he sets out with a mission. He chooses his mission. He doesn't have like the Dio showing up or Pillar Men waking up or a murderer starting to kill people. He chooses a mission. He sees a problem in his community and he rises up to deal with it. Jodie, not too dissimilarly, at some point, like she starts off just free adventuring like most doctors, but at some point she makes the active decision that she's going to chase down leads to the division, figure out what the division is, get back in there and dismantle it if she has to. Both of these people are trying to embed themselves into this larger organization to try to dismantle it. So I think that those two could probably be pretty close. Also, the funny little connection here as well, because Giorno's a mafioso, that means that his companions, his Joe Bros rather, are familia. And Jodie's companions were the fam. So I think this is very appropriate that Jodie would be Giorno. That brings us to 14, who I don't think I'm going to do because he's pretty close to Tenet. We already did Tenet. And, we gave Tenet Joseph. So maybe he's just old man Joseph. First old man Joseph. That's funny too. I didn't even think about it. I gave them, I just realized this now coming back to it, but I gave Joseph to David Tennant and they both lost a hand. So isn't that funny? I didn't even recognize that until I just got to this point trying to think about old man Joseph and his robot hand. Hey, it's all editing Jack and Ash Ketchum. We're just here to say the reason Jack didn't make this connection sooner in the video is because that wasn't the selection. Joseph got McGann, and Tennant got Johnathan. This must be an old note. I must have been thinking about... I think at some point I was going to give David Tennant Joseph because of the Casanova thing, the Playboy connection, but it wasn't strong enough, and I didn't keep that. So I think that's an old note that somehow wriggled its way into the final version. But yeah, no, I think that we're just going to give him Old Man Joseph and move on with it. And we'll just move straight to Shooty. Now, I'd said earlier that Shooty was pretty close to Josuke whenever I was trying to pick one for Josuke. And I do still think that even though he's not the best one for Josuke, that is the best one for him. They're just both so fabulous. Right? They're both so fabulous, and they both care so much about their hair. But besides that, besides the looks and the way that they like connect on an aesthetic level, they are both healers first and foremost. Shooty comes in on a wave talking about going to therapy, and he's out here healing butterflies with regeneration energy, and he's out here healing the burns on his arm with regeneration energy. He's like healer first, one of his companions is a nurse. Like, that's a whole thing. Like, he's very much about being a healer before a fighter, just the same way that Josuke, his power is to heal. He can't really heal himself necessarily, but he can do healing. So I think that those two are pretty similar. Granted, they're not as similar as others, but like I said, it's hard to match anyone to Josuke just because his vibe is so small town that it's hard to really match anyone to him. But I think that Shooty, even though he's so much more grand in his adventures, just kind of personality wise, power set wise, the implementation of powers, and and just how much he loves his hair and outfits. I think that for me is enough to give him this one. But with that, we're all done. We've had a doctor for every JoJo and a JoJo for every doctor. We could, like I said, do more of these. I think it'd be fun to do which Joe Bro is which companion, which Joe Foe is which big series bad guy in Doctor Who, which aliens are which stands. We could go weird with this. The comparisons run deep, and like I said, the more you look at it, the more you see. I didn't even think about a couple of these until sitting here. The revelation about the Familia wasn't in my script. I just stumbled onto that as I was going through my notes, just sitting here. Like I said, the show's connections are insane. I know how it must appear on the surface. Like, it is kind of weird to say that these two shows are the same, but hopefully now that we've broken it down on a really deep level, you can see that these shows have a lot of similarities, both in their characters and in their themes, in their storytelling. There's so many similarities between these shows, it's kind of scary. But because they're so similar, I was able to see JoJo's for what it was. I was able to see all those tropes and all those storytelling devices and those character aesthetic designs that I didn't really like in anime and recognize them as just being another version of a thing I'd already learned to love in Doctor Who. They were so similar that it just struck something very primal, and I recognized it as familiar. And through this relationship with JoJo's, the floodgates opened, and I started trying to watch other animes that I'd slept on. And boy, did I sleep on some animes. But that's a whole other video for another time. Now that we've unpacked this really thoroughly, I hope that you can see the connections these two shows share, and you can appreciate what they have in common. And I hope you can appreciate that for all I talked about, I completely avoided talking about how they're both extremely gay in the best way possible. Neither of these are good queer representation, by the way, but they are great for bi-curious exploration. Seriously, how many people do you think started their queer journeys through questions that JoJo's and or Doctor Who planted in their brains? It's a magical thing. We didn't even have time to talk about it, part 2. No, that's one too many. That's too many leads. That's too many future videos. You guys don't want to see that. We got a lot more stuff coming up in the future anyway. There's not time on the schedule for it. But this was fun. I hope you guys had fun. This was just me kind of messing around, trying to have a good time. Honestly, like, I wanted to talk about JoJo's in a video anyway, and because I didn't want to start a whole new playlist or go down a whole new tack, I just figured I'll just talk about JoJo's in the context of Doctor Who, and it seemed like a good idea. And we'll see. We'll see if you guys agree. If not, you know, let me have it. Hit the thumbs down button. Again, any take that you don't agree with, I want to hear why. Like, if you just want to, like, not follow me and hit the thumbs down button, that's fine. But, like, change my mind. I'm one of the few people in the world who wants you to try. So, you know, go for it. I'm listening. You know, what did I get totally wrong? Who would have you matched up with? Who? You know how it goes. Get in there, fight.
Please be my friend. Be my friend. Be my friend. Oh, little things with no voice.
Look, it's...
Please be my friend.